Okay, so this is RetroCultCast episode 15, and we just saw Godzilla minus one, the new Godzilla movie. What did you think of it, Nicole?
I thought it was incredible. I had really no expectations going into the movie. I hadn't read anything. I don't even think I had seen the trailer. And I think this is probably one of my favorite movies this year. And this was a really good year for movies. So I think that's saying a lot. What about you?
I thought it was amazing. I mean, there was a lot of hype. I, kept seeing, online. Everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, you have to go see this movie," and I guess I get a little suspicious. My hopes get up. I get my hopes up, and then when I actually do go see the movie, it never lives up to the hype. This actually lived up to the hype, I think. Like I was surprised, and it was also really intriguing how it was. It was really just kind of serious. Like it was a drama. You think Godzilla, like giant man in a rubber suit, knocking down cardboard buildings. There were some tear jerking moments in this.
Well, I think that that's an older type of Godzilla movie, right? Like even though that this one and I don't have much experience with this, so this is again just kind of what I've picked up from listening to other people who have more experience with the Godzilla movies. Even though this one has a lot of homage to older Godzilla movies, I think it's really meant to maybe it's like even moving the franchise in a different direction entirely.
Hmm.
But I mean, watching other reviews that were spoiler free, and we'll try to keep this spoiler free as well. People have said that the best Godzilla movies are the ones that focus on the people, and I think that this movie definitely led with a human interest element.
Hmm. That's interesting. Speaking of people, I have a presentation here. We can actually talk about. Here's the poster, um, the new Godzilla, and some of the people. Now, to your point, I don't. I guess I don't know enough about the genre of these movies to, speak to that. Like emphasis on the monster as spectacle versus emphasis on the characters. But if that is a distinction, then I definitely think this one emphasized the characters. Um,
No, it did. I mean, in I don't want to say that the Godzilla wasn't a kind of character because the
mhm.
monster certainly was, but that
Yeah.
the people were very fully fleshed out. Even characters who come in, later on in the movie, I feel like you really get to learn a lot about them, or there's enough there that it guides you to having a kind of impression of them being very developed characters.
Hmm.
So I mean, I thought it was really great storytelling. You know, Probably more so I'm trying to think of a good comparison. But yeah, like yes, it is a Godzilla movie, it is a monster movie, but it is a um kind of like it's an action movie. It's kind of like a little bit like a drama. Um Definitely about the ability of people to overcome tremendous odds.
Hmm.
There's a lot that I am going to try to again not like give too much away about what happens, but just I loved the critique on war. So the
Hmm.
character here, and well, several of the characters that we meet. Do you say his name is Koichi?
I think it's Koichi.
Koichi.
Yeah.
Koichi is coming back from being in World War II. And there's a pretty pivotal background element to his character that I don't want to give away, but he's coming out of World War II. He's carrying a lot of trauma because of that. So there's a really strong critique on war.
Hmm.
And I also think, again, given the fact that it is set in a post World War II Japan, like obviously there's a lot of acknowledgement and kind of imagining of what that world is like after
Hmm.
the bombings. But there's also there's kind of this implied critique of like the US involvement in World War II, but there's also a lot of critique of the Japanese military and government that I wasn't expecting. And
Hmm.
I thought it was interesting that it propelled a lot of what happened in the movie. So it wasn't just like the kind of looking at the post World War II Japan and the post bombing world, but also like their own reckoning of what they did to their people in the war.
Oh, that's
And I thought
interesting.
that that was so unexpected, but I
Yeah,
really liked it.
yeah, yeah. I was just thinking like Koichi. This picture here, he has the bandages on his head, and he's a wounded character, but he's also like physically wounded, but he's like psychologically wounded. Like there's this
Hmm.
continuous theme of him like still fighting the war, like his war is not over yet. Um, Try not to spoil anything, but yeah, I don't know a lot about Japanese history, but the post-war period in America was one of like great economic flourishing, but I think the post-war period in Japan was probably not so. Like it was. You
The
know,
little bit that we get of that, because I think it's 2 years. I think it starts in 45 and then it ends in 47, I want to
yeah,
say. Might have been 48. So it was like 2 to 3 years in the immediate aftermath of the war. Um, and while we are starting to see, especially with Kyochi and his, I don't know what you would call her, the female character, yeah, Noriko. Those two, like, you can see their move from being in a very impoverished state to something that's a little bit more financially secure. And you can see that not only in the clothes that they're wearing and how like their clothes change, how their kind of appearance changes. It looks like
the
they're
way
able
they're
to
building a
bathe.
house.
Yeah, they build a house first with just like scraps of other buildings that have been destroyed, and then
Hmm.
eventually they're able to upgrade their house to a more permanent structure. So I think that that's really telling. But then all around that structure, that newer structure, there's still all of this evidence of the bombings, and there's
Yeah,
all this destroyed material, destroyed buildings, houses.
I
So that it's all still there. It never goes away.
I thought that the image of the like house incrementally being built and kind of restored. This is before Godzilla comes. It's so emotionally charged. Like you're watching a Godzilla movie and you're seeing these people rebuild their houses, but like you have the genre knowledge that like this stuff is going to get tore down. You know what I mean? Like it's this when you watch a Godzilla movie, it's about seeing architecture, deformed, deconstructed violently. And here you have these incremental scenes where they're like slowly but surely building their houses. It was so like emotionally, um, it resonated with me because it's like, man, this when you see them building that house, it's like you don't build a house in a Godzilla movie. It's not going to turn out well. I love the shot, by the way. This is Noriko. I think this is the first sight she gets of Godzilla, and she's on a subway train. It's not a subway. It's
Just
an
a
above
train.
ground train. Yeah, and she sees and she sees Godzilla coming.
So yeah, so this is all taking place like in general Tokyo, but it's like this is like a certain part of Tokyo, right? It's one of the
No,
more
it's not taking place in Tokyo.
oh,
It's
I
taking
thought it
place
was.
in a different town. Um, yeah, I forget the name of it, but it's pretty clearly not Tokyo. I'm wondering if they're saving Tokyo for like a sequel. But
I guess I got confused because when they were tracking where Godzilla was going, they were
mhm.
anticipating the monster to be, they kept mentioning and showing Tokyo on maps.
Yeah, yeah. Without, I don't want to spoil it, but like the reason why the effort to stop Godzilla is so intense is so that he doesn't get to Tokyo. They're
Oh,
trying to
okay.
they're trying to hold him off from the capital. So,
Okay.
um,
I thought
yeah,
this was like a suburb of Tokyo.
I don't know my Japanese geography, so but don't quote me. But I'm pretty sure it wasn't Tokyo.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
Correct us if you're watching this. Um, I have some other pictures. I have the kid, the doc, and the captain.
So yeah,
Um,
so eventually, how did you? I'm sorry, I keep Kyochi, right?
Koichi, I think.
Koichi.
Yeah.
Yeah, Koichi is able to find work, and these are the people that he works with. There, and this isn't a spoiler, but like his job again in a post-World War environment is to find all of these mines that the U.S. had put in the ocean and in the water surrounding Tokyo, and they have to
The
find them and
Japanese too.
detonate them. Yeah, the Japanese and the U.S. had put all these mines out, and so okay, well now we need to go and deactivate all of them. So that becomes his job. And he meets these three other characters, the kid, the doc, and the captain. They become pretty pivotal as the movie goes on as well. And they really become like a kind of like found family with each other. Like there's scenes
Mm-hmm.
where they're all having dinner together. Um, they're spending a lot of time together. So they do really become important for each other as the movie goes on, which I liked that too, because again, in a environment where so many people have been lost, if not in the fighting itself, but in the bombings. I mean, this probably was what was happening, is that people
Mm-hmm.
were just coming together and trying to find ways to live, and they needed other people to support, to support them and to have support for each other. So I liked this element of the film. It felt really natural.
Yeah. Yeah, their interactions and the relationships that they have, really interesting. Um, you know, like you mentioned that the scene where they're having dinner, I thought that was really cool. Um, without spoiling it, there there's a lot of misconceptions going on among about their backgrounds and stuff. There's some really interesting moments, and funny moments. There's actually some humor, I think,
Hmm.
when they're interacting. A lot of the interactions is so Koichi is a veteran, of course. The doc and the captain are both veterans, but the kid, he was too young to go to war, and so they're not giving him a hard time for going to war. But a lot of the interactions, the dynamic is they're kind of making fun of his naivete. When he talks about war, like, man, I wish the war hadn't ended. This and that. Like, I don't know.
Well, that actually, I think that warrants a pretty strong reaction. Like, don't ever say that. Like, no one wants to go to war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he
So, go on.
no that was a yeah, that wasn't one of the funny they weren't when he says that they give him a pretty hard time for saying that. Yeah. Then we have this guy, the mechanic.
So, again, it would be giving away a lot of the major plot, but this is somebody from Koichi's background who comes back later on in the movie, plays a very important role, not just in the kind of overall narrative, but in the character development for Koichi as well. Like, I think that we needed and he's a mechanic who knows how to
Mm-hmm.
work on, fighter planes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we really need Tachibana to come back into the narrative when he does, because it helps to solidify the character growth that Koichi undergoes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a pivotal character, I think. And this actor was really, convincing. Um,
Well, you should just say too, like all the actors were very
mm-hmm.
convincing. And again, they weren't folks that I was able to I didn't recognize any of them. So I can't say, "Oh yeah, like I was expecting this to be a great movie because of so and so being in it." But just not having the kind of experience with a lot of Japanese movies and television that maybe other viewers would have. I mean, I thought the whole cast did an amazing job. Like it was incredibly well acted. And again, I think there might be just kind of a general perception of Godzilla movies being really hokey and low
Mm-hmm.
budget and bad acting, and like none of those things apply to this movie at all.
I don't think this is too much of a spoiler. This is a teensy minor spoiler. Mr. Takibana is angry at Koichi because he feels like Koichi, uh, should have sacrificed himself at a certain point, and to save more people during the war. and so there's this tension of like, Koichi was not honorable. He wasn't courageous when he should have been, and this his anger towards Koichi is like really interesting. But they develop a relationship. So I hope I didn't spoil too much. Did I spoil too much?
No.
Okay, okay. So then we have this is some specific scenes from the movie. This is when they first see Godzilla, uh, when they're on the mine sweeping boat, and I think that their reactions to Godzilla are like. I watched another I'm sorry, not interview, a review of Godzilla minus one on YouTube, and somebody said that their the reactions that they have are very authentic. I think that's true.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's not just that kind of hokey put on reaction that you might see in some other kinds of monster movies, but this, you actually felt that there was a lot of fear
Mm-hmm.
um emanating from all of the characters. Like, again, just speaks to the great level of acting that is brought to this film. It was very believable. Like, yeah, in that moment, if you're first seeing the Godzilla creature, and I also liked how intimidatingly big he was, compared to obviously the people, but like the boats, like and I wish I knew more about the other Godzilla movies, because I'm wondering how many of them had scenes at sea like this did, where there are these
Mm-hmm.
huge war ships, like what's the not a carrier
Yeah,
ship,
battleships,
battleships, yeah, these huge battleships, and
destroyer or
compared,
battleship. I don't know what the different sizes are. Mm-hmm.
yeah, well, maybe they were both of them. They were both very, very large. They had very many very large ships in this movie,
Mm-hmm.
and those were just miniature compared to the scaling of the Godzilla creature. So yeah, like when you're looking at screenshots of the actors at different moments, when they're acting out their fear at seeing the monster, like it I think it's very legitimate feeling because of how big the monster is presented in the other scenes of the movie as well.
Yeah, yeah. Godzilla is almost um, well. There's no almost about it. Like Godzilla is like sublime, and it also seems like his anger is like beyond human. It's like there when he walks through, there are certain shots where he's walking through the city and he's just looking forward, like his eyes are forward, and he's not looking at the ground. The people are. For me that was really like it was kind of disturbing. Just think about like this thing is so powerful, like it doesn't think twice about and it's not, in the very beginning of the movie, there are some moments where Godzilla kind of makes eye contact with actual humans, but later once he's in his full dark majesty, he's not paying attention to individuals. It's like he's beyond individual people.
Yeah, I
There's
mean,
our first shot of Godzilla, by the way.
there's no there's no need for him to be paying attention to the people. And I think that's another thing that makes movies like this very kind of inherently frightening. It's like if a creature like this does rise up from like the depths of an ocean, and like what are its motivations? Because it's not actively feeding, right? It's not looking for a place to live, it's not looking for shelter, it's just going onto land. And I think at one point the doc, whose character name is Noda, I believe, says something like this is part of its territory now. So is it
Mm-hmm.
just trying to widen its territory? And then if
Mm-hmm.
that's the case, you would think, well, okay, why? And then it's not a far reach to assume it's probably expanding its territory to keep other monsters from having that as its territory. So then there are more of them,
Oh, that's
right?
creepy.
Which it's very horrifying to start thinking about that. It's not just the size or just kind of the um lack of care, or even like kind of acknowledgement of humankind. It's like, oh, there's probably a lot more of these under the water, and
I
we
didn't
don't
think about that.
know,
That's pretty disturbing.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But I
I,
liked how the Godzilla was rendered in this.
Hmm.
I thought he was really cool looking.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I have any quibbles, it was a lack of, you know, practical effects. You know, I think you can tell that it's CGI, but is really good CGI. You know, it's barely a complaint. It's uh, and it was I'm not sure how I could say it. Like it. No, I'm not. I withdraw my complaint. I think the CGI is just fine, right? But this is our first shot, and then we have I took a screenshot from. So they have a gun on the mine, a sweeping boat, where they shoot the mines, and they're just shooting these like into its mouth, and it's not doing anything.
No.
It's like invulnerable for most of the movie. It's just completely intractable, and there's no way of, you know, it's you know, it's really scary.
Which again, I think the fact that it's the setting of the movie is so important, right? Because what are these Japanese men who were fighting in war coming from? They were
Hmm.
coming from um we know who our enemy is. We know how to hurt them and we know how to kill them, right? And maybe you
Hmm.
even had a sense of why you were doing what you were doing.
Hmm.
I don't mean the lower in the military scale. I mean, maybe you lost that, but fundamentally it was like, well, I'm going to protect the country I love, right? The kind of the same reasons that Americans would go to war.
Hmm.
And in here you have an enemy that you don't know the motivations of them and you don't know how to hurt it, right? And that must be so frustrating. And again, I'm imagining a world where this would be the case and all these I think was World War II still when they called post traumatic stress shell shock,
No, that
or is
was
that
World War
only
One.
World War One?
I,
Okay.
let me. I don't want to talk about something I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm pretty sure shell shock is associated with World War One, but it may have still been called shell shock for many years after that. I'm not sure when it became post traumatic stress disorder, but
Yeah,
potentially.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know the history of that. I just knew that shell shock was something that they called the kind of state of being that soldiers would come back from World War One in. And I didn't know if it carried on to the Second World War as well. But at any rate, like you have these soldiers who are, they need they need help to readjust to civilian life. They're obviously not getting it. Um, and then to encounter something like this, I can just imagine it would probably continue just to push and push and push people, right? Which again, like one of the things that happens in this movie that I loved was it was a critique of military systems and a kind of uplifting of the power of just people coming together to solve problems. Like I thought that was really great, and I think there's even a time where like somebody who was a general, like they basically say like, the government's not going to help us, the military isn't going to help us, we have to do this on our own.
Hmm.
So I was really loving that as the kind of the direction of the movie and elements of the movie. I hadn't even considered that, that would be something that would happen. I mean, again, like if you think of other examples and coming from like experience with like American monster movies, it typically ends up being the government and the military systems come in at some point. Now, maybe they're not effective, but they're there in
Hmm.
some ways. And I think here you really weren't seeing that, but it was a deliberate decision to not have those elements in the movie.
Yeah. So I was thinking. Obviously, we've only seen it. We saw it yesterday. So a lot to think about. But I think the original Godzilla. I think it's fair to say that it had. Well, was the original Godzilla just a monster movie, or did it have like allegorical significance? A lot of people will say that it's about, the nuclear bomb, and I'm sorry, the atomic bomb, in fear of nuclear power. So I'm wondering, like, well, is this just more of the same? Is this just another allegory for, you know, the trauma that was nuclear war? And I don't know. I think there's more to it than that, and particularly because of the elements that you're talking about. The way that the government is talked about as being it's not going to be. You can't rely upon the government, and then it talks about the military. It's almost like if I'm going to do an allegorical reading of this once again, it's only been a day. It's almost like this is more climate change, or more like there are certain crises that like humans have created in the Anthropocene that are just like beyond our own control now. Like that we've like, because obviously Godzilla, the lore is that Godzilla is a mutant caused by the atomic bomb. So it's like we've created these crises that are sublime, that are kind of beyond any single agent or agency, and that like we're just basically trying to survive at this point. Like we're in survival mode, and survival consists of creating these smaller communities, like Noriko and Koichi's basically I don't know what you call it, found family, right? But I still need to think about that more. How is this not just an allegory for nuclear war? How is it different than the other ones? Because I think there's something else going on. I think there's something more to it, and maybe you would need to know more about Japanese culture in order to understand precisely what's going on. But also we have the Godzilla slide. I thought Godzilla in this movie was so cool. He kind of looks like I don't know. Looks like almost like refuse, looks like, like a trash island in the ocean, that's given form. I don't know if that makes sense. Like it looks like he's a junkyard walking, right? He kind of melds in with the background of the destruction. So maybe there's some fear of environmental destruction there. I don't know. I also haven't read any interviews with the director. Here's our last slide.
Yeah, and again, like images like this, I'm just imagining it was so important for the movie to be set when it was, because these it carries a lot more meaning, right? It's like people are having to confront mass destruction again. From this kind of like I don't want to say unknown enemy, because obviously he's right there. People are watching this happen, but like the helplessness that everyone would feel at this moment, and especially like that must be crippling for people who are coming back from war, who are the veterans who went to war, and not to mention that Japan lost, right, World War II. So there's just a lot, and it probably if you are coming from a Japanese family, Japanese background, if you had a lot of familiarity with the culture, I'm sure you could say a lot more about the impact that this has had. But just as an American viewer, I thought it was just so interesting how they were confronting these kinds of images. And it just was a reminder that like wars and things that happened, decades or hundreds of years ago, like they never really leave a culture. They're always making an impact on the cultures and the people that endured, those wars. And then, the people who've come after, like it's always present somehow in the culture. Like those things change cultures. What's the word I'm trying to say, Jay?
Irrevocably.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something that I thought that was really fascinating about how you corrected yourself. It's like he's known, Godzilla is known, and I'm thinking of like when monsters show up in Western films, like giant monsters, like I'm trying to think.
King Kong.
Like, well, King Kong is actually going to contradict my point. But my point is that like in things like Jurassic Park, the monster is often like kind of behind the scenes and shadowy, and like you just see the water, the cup of water that's radiating as it's thumping toward. You think about that, Godzilla, the 2000 Godzilla, like Godzilla was kind of cut up by the camera, like you just saw his face in between or Cloverfield. If you remember Cloverfield, which was a found footage film where like the monster is kind of fragmented through all these different kind of media points of views. So the monster is not seen. In this film, it's like it's undeniable. It's like middle of the day. It's right out in the open. There's no denying the tragedy. There's even a scene where like the media people are like, they're on the roof of a building telling us what's happening, and it's like, and they're watching, and I don't want to spoil it, but they're basically reporting what's happening as they're seeing it. And so I feel like it's different whenever you like, maybe that's a cultural difference, is that like when you can actually see the monster, there's there's no agency there. There's just pure kind of, it's like, I'm not sure what to make about that difference, but I think that's an important difference with this movie. Godzilla is like an undeniable, spectacle. And not just spectacle. Spectacle implies that you're just watching it, when really, it's like you're not just watching it, you're running from it, because it's coming for you. But yeah, this movie, I know I'm analyzing it intellectually, but like it was just a good movie. It was just a entertaining, one of the best movies I've seen this year. Yeah, I can't think of a movie that I enjoyed more this year. Can you? Even
there are other. There were very different movies. Like this is the only movie like this I saw this year. But it was definitely one that I would want to go back and rewatch. There's probably a lot of elements, like more subtler things that I missed. And like I said, I'd like to watch other Godzilla movies now. I did see just a quick Wikipedia search, there's like 37 movies on this franchise. Probably won't watch all of them, but there's probably, a list of like the best movies to watch. And I'm sure this is capping a lot of those lists now. And I mean, if nothing else, like it's really, I think, brought a lot of people into the Godzilla world who may not have, like, if you would have just asked me at any other day, hey, do you want to watch a Godzilla movie? I'd probably be like, yeah, but it wouldn't be something that I would want to follow through on necessarily. Like I wouldn't care if I didn't watch it. But now that I've watched this, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm interested to watch some other ones now. Like this is definitely an experience. I also just really loved the fact that it wasn't dubbed in English. Like it was all in Japanese, with English subtitles. And when we went and saw it, the theater wasn't packed, but it was decently filled. And I know that sometimes people complain about subtitles, but I'm like, I think something would have been lost if the film would have been dubbed in English. So I appreciated that it was in Japanese. The other thing I like to mention, and I did recognize this, was that there were samples of music from some of the earlier Godzilla movies. So kind of like that iconic sounds, and I'm not going to try to recreate them, but if anybody would be like, oh, what does a Godzilla movie sound like with the music, I think everyone would kind of have the same sounds in mind. And I was really pleased to hear some of the music appear in the movie, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, I'm not qualified to talk about how all the different Godzilla movies were cited, but I'm sure there were some. I would be surprised if there weren't one or two match on action shots, like a Godzilla nerd could point to like a specific mise en scène and be like, that's from this movie or that movie. And the score, honestly, I could recognize the score. Like I've seen the first Godzilla, and it evokes that first movie, or at least that era of 1954, I think, is the first Godzilla, like that era of Japanese filmmaking. But I was pleasantly surprised. The hype is real. Yeah,